is
You mind if I record?
on the committee with me. We've been working to try to solidify communication tools to alleviate some of the challenges with implementation. So I want to talk to you today or tonight about the accelerated impact approach that we've been developing sort of as we go in the implementation in Barrington. So the objective—
Let me just interrupt 1 second. For the sake of the people on Zoom, can you stand closer to the screen? We're gonna
Sure.
get both you and the slides on the same.
How's this?
That's good. Yeah, it's daunting.
Okay. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to accelerate action. We're trying to move the needle, and we're trying to do that with enhanced communication tools. So what is the challenge? What is the problem we're trying to tackle? Well, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this particular graph. It's from the GAP report from the UN 2022, and I want to highlight for you the red arrow that you see here, which is the gap for 2030, and you see the policy as it stands, and the gap is going to show you where we need to go with our policy implementation if we're going to have any hope of meeting the 1.5 degrees. So there's a significant amount of work that needs to happen. And what are the barriers to implementation? Well, the barriers to implementation is not that we need plans. We have plenty of plans. We don't need new technology, although it's welcome. We already have all the technology that we need. So the barriers that we've encountered are lack of political commitment among those who are in a position to make the decisions to do the implementation. And as I heard here earlier, there's lots of groups that are in opposition for various initiatives that we're trying to do, and they're largely made by misinformation and by preference that overshadows the effort that we're trying to do. Lack of confidence in technical solution. We've heard people say solar panels are going to catch fire. There's glare, there's reflection, they don't work. So we've had to battle that. Even if we presented ROI that shows that there's a significant return on investment by implementing technical solutions, they are still a no-go. And then lastly, most of the literature on implementation, municipal implementation, talks about the lack of understanding of scientific and technical data. So most people that are involved in town government are volunteers. These are people who are professionals. They have other jobs during the day. They may not have time or the inclination to really dig into the sciences, and you need to be scientifically literate to be able to recommend or promote some of these initiatives that were suggested. So I'm going to take you back to COVID. Sorry. So during COVID, we were in a predicament where we needed society to adopt the technical solutions so that we could deal with the pandemic. And we all heard we need to flatten the curve, get it underneath what the healthcare system can handle. Well, flattening the curve also applies to climate. And we need to flatten the curve in the same way if we're going to meet the 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees or wherever we will likely end up. And the challenge here is that the policies, they need to address both or consider both the technical solution and what society is willing to accept. So I omitted to tell you my research for my dissertation is in behavioral economics, and I studied what motivates people, what are the motivations and barriers to adaptation of sustainability. I did my study on why don't people hang up their towel in hotels. I know that's a very, very important thing to research, but that's where I spent. So I learned the barriers, and they are often behavioral. So why are they behavioral? Well, because technology advances at a faster pace than humans can keep up with. And some of you may have had to have a younger member help you put something on your phone, or you've had to help somebody else adopt some technology, because we're constantly learning, and the humans just don't adapt to technology at the same rate as the technology advances. So this also heightens the challenge that I'm hoping that I'm going to demonstrate that we've been addressing. So how do we overcome these barriers to accelerated implementation? I figured I'd share with you, that is January 18th. This is Latham Park in Barrington. This is in West Barrington. This is the high tide along with the low pressure system that raised the sea level 3.5 feet above mean high tide and flooded the parking lot of the newly fixed Latham Park. Yes.
The storm drains were blocked.
Ah.
Yeah, the storm drain. Oh, yes,
That's
yes.
what somebody said at the Portsmouth meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Lovely
Right.
climate change.
Thank you for saying that, because that is an excellent example of, people just don't think things through. I mean, we heard this last night about blocked storm drains and about storm drain capacity to create, reservoirs to hold water. Well, that has nothing to do with flooding. Stormwater mitigation, which we know is a big issue, but that can't be solved in this anyway. So what are the topics that are actionable? So the topics that I want to talk about, they come from these documents. So we, as I said earlier, we have all the plans. So in Barrington, we have what's called the Barrington Resilient Future Resolution. And the Barrington Resilient Future Resolution was one step that the town council took in 2021 to say, we mean business on the Act on Climate. We want to do something on the Act on Climate. They identified a few things that we could do generally in big terms, but there was no specifics on how we were going to implement anything. So then what the comprehensive community plan, which is another plan that has actionable topics, they actually go out and list exactly what needs to be done. So that is generally harder to ignore, but we've been successful at ignoring recommendations and implementation in Barrington. We have been very good at that. We have been unsuccessful for 12 years consecutive in trying to put up solar panels. We have 0 solar panels. It has been in our plans. It has been part of our fundraising for school buildings. For example, 3 times have we asked the voters for funding based on putting solar panels on schools, and yet we've implemented 0. So I am in conversations with the Attorney General, because that is bait and switch. And the Attorney General's office thinks that there's something there, so I will be meeting with them again to try to put some pressure on the decision makers to implement. Excuse me. Hazard mitigation plan. This is more focused on hard infrastructure, roads, and such. Again, topics that we can act on in there, as well as the Act on Climate. So what are these communication tools that we're using? Well, I'm going to talk about 3 things that we use that sort of work in concert. The first one is a topic summary. And as the name indicates, a topic summary is simply just a summary of all the relevant information for a particular discussion topic. Anything that's going to impact the stakeholders, people that we're going to discuss with, and we do this to try to keep it at a at a level. Here's all the information. We do that because, and this is actually this is one of the topic summaries. It addresses things like the scientific information, financial information, and any restrictions or questions regarding operations. So we've been trying to promote electrified school buses. We've been trying to work on that since 2019. And we got a one-line email that said, we're not interested at this time from the school committee. So that is not the last word on that. But again, the topic summary is so that we found that it's a powerful tool because people can't come back to you with questions. And what happens in municipal government is you have a recommending body that makes a decision and promotes an idea to those who make decisions. And if they have any questions, what they'll do is they defer it because of that lack of political will, and they'll send it back to the committee. And I'm sure you're aware that's a common practice. So one of the things that we're trying to stop there is to basically ad nauseum provide exhaustive information, so there's really nothing left to chance. And lastly, the topic summary puts everyone on the same level. The focus is to keep the language clear and transparent. This is one of the issues in vulnerable communities, and often mentioned in social justice literature, that people just don't have time or access to the data. So the idea is that the topic summary is going to provide the information openly, and in our case, it's shared through the town. It's posted on town websites. It's available for anyone who wants to read the information. So that we're all singing from the same notes, kind of. We're all singing the same tune, and it enables people who maybe don't have the scientific background to at least form opinions, to ask questions, to be involved in the conversation.
So can I just ask, like, roughly how long would a topic summary be?
It depends. Most of them are 2 to 3 pages.
Okay.
So a little side story. And the starting point of this was when the Act on Climate was actually put through the legislation. I wrote a white paper on the Act on Climate. And I wrote a paper on how do we begin to implement the promise that the Act on Climate is. That was a 15-page white paper summary, which absolutely no one read. I sent it to all the authors of the legislation. I got an email back from a couple of them, thank you for doing this. And I think 1 or 2 of them wrote and asked me some questions. But I learned there that 15 pages is not what you do. So we've been trying to keep them shorter. Hans has been an excellent resource in helping me navigate the editing and sort of how we form the language. And so
Because a lot of them are actually shorter than a page, less than a page. You know, it depends what the complexity of the issue is.
Yeah, right. I just sent out a topic summary on decals, and that was, decals because we have 6 electric vehicles in the town of Barrington now, but none of them are marked as being electric. So what part of the cycle is people obviously have to see that we're making inroads on electric vehicles, and so we want to press those decals. But any communication across the silos, a topic summary saves you a phone call, saves you an email, saves you having to explain it to people. Just go look at the topic summary and then ask me the questions if you have them afterwards. So when we as a committee have reviewed the topic summary, and the topic summaries, I should say, they usually include a motion to be made during the meeting. So you have some time to think through the motions. I'm sure you guys have been in public meetings where people go back and forth on wording for a motion and so on and so forth. So we start with a baseline. And then when the motion passes, that gets communicated in a policy brief. So the policy brief is basically when it leaves the silo of the committee and gets communicated with recommendations to the decision-making body. In our case, we are a committee that is put on by the voters. And we make recommendations to the town council. So we are the science advisory board to the Barrington Town Council. And when we have reviewed that specific topic, it becomes a policy brief with whatever edits the committee has then put the conversation through, and we usually agree what's going to be included, omitted, or added to the policy. And then lastly, we are using objectives and key results. Are you familiar with the work of John Doerr? John Doerr wrote Measure What Matters. John Doerr was one of the founders of Intel, I believe, back in the 80s, when the competition for the computers for the hardware market was dependent on chips, and advances in computer chips was really the pinnacle of the competitive race. Intel adopted what they call OKRs, so objective and key results, which is a 90-day goal setting with an objective that has key results that will solve the objective. And on a 90-day time frame. And what we do when the committee meets, and we met last night, and we were talking, in fact, we were talking about flooding. And the topic gets offered up to the committee. So there's 9 members on the committee. Is there anyone who wants to take on the topic of? So if someone says yes, they get onto a 90-day time frame. So then we're going to revisit that at the April meeting. At the April meeting, it'll be on the agenda. In March, we're going to ask, how are you doing on the flooding? How are things coming? Any updates? Right?
Question about that, the committee itself, who are the members and are they elected, or how did they join the committee?
So the members apply, and then they go in front of the town council, and the town council interviews them, and then they get appointed. I mean, we have a really significant bench of talent. We have 4 people with a PhD, we have an environmental lawyer, and we have 2 policy professionals who have been in the solar industry. So it's a really great. We're fortunate to have a really deep bench of technical. Are there any questions? You just stop me if you have any questions. So the OKRs, they've kind of sort of put the pressure on that we need to meet these deadlines. So we've been running a pilot in the town of Barrington. We call it a pilot. It's not officially a pilot, but we've been test running these topic summaries and policy briefs, and we're seeing what we can accomplish with them. And there are some key results that we have. One of the key results that came out of, again, topic summary, policy briefs make it easy for people to write grants because all the information for a grant is there. We happened to get, there was an opportunity for us to jump on a police vehicle. There was a supersized grant for it.
You could see now why we're not happy with the decal.
You're right, yeah, that's, as you can see, E1, that was the E1. And the police cars in Barrington are all just black with black decals. It's really it's not ideal. So it took there was some resistance. We talked about misinformed questions. What if we're in a high-speed chase? We're going to run out of battery. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Barrington, what's the high-speed chase? Some dog is in your yard. Kind of, yeah. How many what about prison transport? And I said, how many prisoners do we transport? We can fit 3 in the back seat, 2 in the trunk. How many do you want? So prison transport was not really an issue, but down the list we went. What about setting up the equipment? I spoke to a guy while we were in this. I spoke to a chief of police in Wisconsin who had just adopted a Model 3 Tesla, which was actually what I was gunning for. I wanted them to do the Tesla. And so I got a lot of anecdotal information from him. And we had just gotten a new chief of police. So there was an opportunity, and in came the car. The town manager had the policy brief to go off when he applied for the grant, and things came through, and all of a sudden we had a police car. At first, there were a few people who said, we're never, ever gonna drive this. And then the next time I checked in with him, this car was the hot seat. So I now know what that means, the hot seat. Everybody wants to drive it. So now we have three. We have two Ford F-150 Lightning. They just ordered another one. And we have this one still. Here's another key result, municipal procurement policy aligned with Barrington Resilient Future Resolution. So the Barrington Future Resolution talked about shifting purchases towards more renewable energy. But that's where the recommendation ended. So we picked it up from there. I drafted a new procurement policy based on the one that we had. We ran it through the committee as a topic summary. We changed one word, an or went to an end or something. But other than that, it went through and it got approved. Right? So just by suggesting things, and that's what's often missing, is people just aren't suggesting it because they are afraid to speak up. Here's another key result. The Office of Energy Resources, FEMA, a lot of these organizations have been talking about the importance of resilience hubs. If you've been in the EC4 meetings, that is a perennial topic, comes up almost every month. Hans and I had actually been in a meeting when they were talking about resilience hubs. A policy paper was drafted on turning this existing building into a resilience hub. We just secured just over $800,000 in funding. It is going to be more than a resilience hub. It's going to be a community center, workforce development, access to internet. And these resilience hubs are really valued. So if we think back on Hurricane Ian that hit Fort Myers, there were 35 deaths from the lack of access to electricity. Medical equipment failed, and people didn't have access to electricity. So if they had had solar panels, a battery backup, some of that could have been avoided. So multi-use facility. So that was drafted, and then we we actually recycled this policy brief a couple of times. First, we proposed it as a package with all electric buildings and resilient landscapes. And we were told that the state needs to decide all electric buildings. We can't do that. So we separated the resilient landscape and ran it through another committee that I was actually on. And that committee, Open Space Committee, they said, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. As soon as we had policy brief hit the planning office, we just hired a resilience manager who took the policy brief and wrote a grant, and we got $16,000 for the pilot of a resilient landscape. So you see, this is one of the concept drawings for a resilient landscape. And if you are familiar with the Barrington Town Hall, this is in front of the Barrington Town Hall. This is actually the road that leads up to the library and the town hall. And this is a demo garden. So that's going to be included. We're going to include interpretive signs, QR codes, so that we can link it to information that people can take and use to make their own yards more resilient. So these are 4 key results that we've seen, and the speed of adaptation is far higher, because the average rate of a policy from the time that, like we say, the Act on Climate gets passed in 2021, if we look at the average rate of implementation, it takes 7 years. 7 years from policy, from the time it gets passed until it's implemented. And we're trying to cut that, and with these 4 initiatives, I mean, I know this is anecdotal, we've cut that down significantly. And the challenge with research in this area is that it's very hard to get a sample, because every town is different and every policy is different. And we need to, I think it's important for us to understand that these climate policies are not going to be implemented at a state or federal level. They're all going to be implemented at a municipal level, because that's where the sewer drains are. That's where the roads are, right? It is, you know, at best, we have the state come in and take care of a couple of state roads. The rest is on us. And the same is true for all municipalities, all 39 municipalities. So
You're
I'm sorry.
talking about resilience.
Yeah.
A bit more than mitigation.
Well, both mitigation and resilience. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It's not just mitigation, but it is resilience,
Right.
first and foremost. But like, if we talk about the resilience hub, for example, this is mitigation. You talk about this is mitigation. Less fuel used to mow the lawn.
Yeah.
Less fertilizer, less water.
Mhm.
So there is it is somewhat intertwined. So the takeaway from this pilot is that it is apparent that clear and transparent information available to all stakeholders is going to accelerate adoption. Just if we think about how do innovations diffuse into society, the first thing is knowledge. We have to have knowledge of the innovation, and by using clear and transparent information, we're going to broaden the knowledge among the stakeholder groups. And then secondly, the policy briefs, they become actionable when they've been vetted through a committee that is put there to evaluate and make suggestions. Before we started to use policy briefs, the recommendations from the committee were just a line in the minutes. The meeting minutes. The meeting minutes would have a sentence or so that recommended action, but there was no actual. Like I'm thinking back on some of the policy briefs that we sent. They would have a 9 or 10 recommendations that the select board, I mean the town council, would then decide whether or not they were going to act on. So what are the next steps? I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to find some resources to develop a curriculum to promote policy implementation like this. The system that we've developed is perfectly replicable and scalable. What we're doing is just policy implementation, and this can apply to all of the other 38 municipalities if there is such interest. We're also looking for resources for climate science training. Mark, who's here, is with the planning department in Pawtucket, and Mark and I have been talking about how do we work this into what's going on in Pawtucket, which is a vulnerable community, under-resourced in some ways. That is not going to be a hindrance if we go in and we promote and educate. So, and Mark and I are both. Mark was a professor before he went into planning, and Mark and I have developed several curriculums together. So how to develop it and how to dovetail it with what's going on in the policy office or planning office is pretty clear. And then how do we spread the word? You know, this is I would be so delighted to share this with anyone who wants to hear. Again, thank you for listening. With that, I think we just show you, this is Bullock's Cove, and my house is somewhere there. Anyway,
Close to the ocean.
Yeah, and actually, this street here floods very frequently. I flooded in all these three events. And this house here, the basement floods at every one of these events. So I am, my house is, let's see, one house in. I call them my frontline defenders. Because my house is in the second row. So I've got some time.
Yeah, and the resilience center is basically on the picture.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's also why we took great pains to make sure that all the infrastructure is off the ground and at second floor level, because there may be in a 50-year storm event, there will sure be flooding, but the infrastructure will still work.
Yeah, and actually part of that 800,000 that mentioned for the resilience center is to take all the electrical utilities out of the basement and put it up on the second floor. We just installed, and this was kind of sad. We had a meeting last night in that building, and when we walked in, the building was piping hot because they had turned on the steam heat, which overrode the we got heat pumps installed on the second floor. So the steam heat overrode the thermostats for the heat pumps, so the heat pumps were shut off, but we were happily running it on number 2 fuel oil. But I did speak to the town manager about that. Any questions?
How visible would you say these initiatives are in the town of Barrington? Because it sounds like you're talking a lot to like town officials and other organizations like that. So would you say the average person in Barrington would be familiar with this project? And do you think visibility is good or not good, depending on these projects?
Well, we're in the paper a lot, so we do the op-ed. I mean, we certainly got visibility when we tried to ban lawn care equipment. Would you like to talk about that? So, you know, they know what's happening. Those policies are read. We do have them on the website. Some of the policy briefs make it to the website. The plan is that all policy briefs need to be posted to the website. It bears mentioning here that we just signed on a climate action plan. So we signed consultants who are coming in to do a climate action plan for the town of Barrington, which is due to be out in September, which is going to actually dovetail pretty well with these policy briefs that we've now pre-worked all the things, and they have to just dovetail what we've already kind of sort of identified and recommended is going to dovetail greatly with the climate action plan when it comes in. So the visibility, there's some, but not full.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think also it's difficult to mobilize a larger part of the population in Barrington. You know, when our meetings are public, we meet once a month with a committee, like all committees. There is probably once per quarter is one or two people coming in just to watch, and that's it. So there is not really a rush, but we try to provide the information to the website. The town has a pretty good website, and we have a committee page. But I think where we have quite a bit of visibility is really writing letters to the editor. We had a number of committee members who wrote letters to the editor or an op-ed. We had one for under the title, "How do you know how high the flood will be at your house?" that pointed to the Storm Tools website and explained that, and also went into resources for making your house more resilient as much as you can. We had a number of this type articles or letters to the editor or op-eds, and we always put them up on the website. And the Barrington Times is pretty popular, so you find also then there will be Facebook posts after that in both directions. You know, we get also hammered often, but what the hell, you know, it's a steady trickle makes it. You know, it's the same with the policy briefs and the summaries. They have value beyond us sending them to the town council for the next meeting to be voted on, ideally. Because we're in this intersection between science and making recommendations. We only have recommendation making power. We cannot decide on the committee. And the town council, which is a political body, they may or may not decide on it out of political reasons. So we had a year ago almost, we had a discussion about a strong fraction in town trying to get astroturf on the high school in the floodplain. The worst thing you can have astroturf there because the infill washes out right away and gets more plastic into the bay. We had a policy brief, a summary there that made the point that the committee strongly recommends not to do it, and we had other suggestions there, and it did not lead to a decision in the town council. Now, after almost a year, the proponents of the astroturf come back again, and it's easy for us. We pull the old brief and summary out, and we're done.
True local
It
government.
needs reminding, of course, but I think it's very simple. We provide clarity and consistency. You know, these things come in the same appearance and disguise every time. Town council knows about it, knows what that is. We don't explain it anymore. And clarity, well, we try to provide a comprehensive information as much as we can. Nothing is perfect, of course, but it avoids a number of these loops where, because it's insufficiently explained or certain key data are missing, it's not actionable right away. So the town council throws it back to committee. We rewrite it and it goes back again. So it's easily a quarter of a year that you lose every single time. And that happens very rarely now.
We've got a question on Zoom. Donnie, do you want to unmute yourself and ask? I think we'll be able to hear you here. Or I can just read it. If not, can you unmute yourself? Still muted, I think. There you go.
Okay. I'm Donnie McGee. I live in Bristol. I've been in Rhode Island for 3 years, and I belong to the League of Women Voters, and I'm acting chair of their Climate Action Advocacy Committee, but I'm new to it. I'm very interested in what you're talking about because I would like to see Bristol do more of what you're doing and see things accelerated in terms of what's happening to protect our environment. My main question is, and thank you for your work and that of your colleagues as well, but my main question is, you have a very well-educated committee that is has been appointed to advise the town council. How did that come about? And I mean, because that's key, I think, to what all the things that you're doing. And before we can, follow through with policy briefs and hope that we get some response, I'm curious, how long have you had this committee in place, and how did it happen, I guess?
Well, thank you for your kind words and for your question. The committee was originally formed as an energy committee, and it was intended to make sure that the town of Barrington get the best price on energy deals, solar, and there were different energy offers that were available. So the energy committee was intended to review that. Then resiliency was added to the committee in 2014 or 15, I think. And it became the Resilience and Energy Committee, and it's sort of grown from that. Now, how can you do this in other towns? Some towns don't have an advocacy group. I know Pawtucket does not have an advocacy group for resilience, and that is a bigger town. But the policy briefs and the topic summaries, those are easily adjusted to Bristol. The problems are the same problems. we're looking at renewable installation of new renewable energy. You know, the education that I was recommending here earlier, developing a curriculum and providing resources for climate science to other municipalities is part of what I am advocating for. If the League of Cities and Towns would see the benefit of promoting this, I would be happy to go and speak to anyone about this and seeing how we could help other towns develop the same.
Thank you.
This sounds short. I think your question also points towards how do we recruit people with subject matter expertise. And I think it's a little bit the luck of the draw, but I would recommend that you check with your town and see what requirements they have for committee members, because there's also always some attrition. And when they try to hire a new committee member, there are certain pointers, at least. People with whatever expertise are preferred or whatever is in there. Maybe we check that between Bristol and the Barrington requirements. If we have the magic word that Bristol doesn't have in there, I doubt it. And then otherwise, I think it's just like people meet with like people. So we flock together, you know, if you're scientists and are interested, climate is certainly not news to you. And there's also, if you have children, you have more motivation even to do something about it. And then the next question is, what can you do locally? And that's in part also word of mouth, you know. There's no really straight answer. You can't force someone
Thank you.
who is science-minded to go in the committee, but it might happen.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it seems like a great kind of process that you have put together and implemented. But yeah, I have similar questions of how do other towns implement it? How important is it that there's a committee within the town government that's recommending? Could an outside group be putting these policy summaries, recommendations together? It might not be an easy path to get those in front of the committee like you guys can, since you're committee vetted and hired by the town. And then the other question about, yeah, Barrington probably has a little more expertise than Gloucester. And so one thought was that if it doesn't have to be a town committee, could towns come together and do something kind of a little more, you know, 3 or 4 towns, but I don't know if you.
Sure, I can actually, I was a selectman in a town in Vermont. So I became a US citizen in 2005 and I ran for office in 2006. And I was elected and I served 2 terms. And one of my platforms was using local option tax to promote and beautify the town, promote it's as a destination. I was in Mount Snow, Vermont. And soon after, the town of Wilmington, which was next to us, did the same thing. And it grew together as a united effort. And I could certainly see that. And one of the goals with this, and I've spoken to EC4 and DEM, this is something that if they were interested in doing a statewide effort to assist towns, that I would be excited about that. So, sure, certainly.
I wonder, you know, these are great ideas. And I really, I wholeheartedly agree with the idea that local action is meaningful action. And I'm wondering if we can figure a way to share ideas and resources. Because, you know, I'm in Barrington, Newport has an environmental committee. It'd be interesting to see what, you know, I'm on another energy committee in the town of Newport, not the city one. And one of our members was looking to Newburyport, which has a website, which is a really great website, which says, how could you do something for the environment, right? And the whole idea behind it is, getting people to have successful affirmative action, right, is really, really a strong way to build a community response. And people don't know that, so Newburyport's idea would be great in Barrington and in Newport and in every community. But really, the larger question is, wouldn't it be great if we had these communities having an annual day of good ideas, best practices, or some sharing, so that people could say, oh, look what Barrington's doing, look what Newburyport's doing, look what, and make all of our ideas that much better. So Cary may have a role in,
Yeah.
maybe that's the kind of statewide thing that they could say, hey, we know that it's local action that is really gonna do a lot of the work, not all of it, but a lot of it. And how do we promote that? And that could also lead to resource sharing, where Central Falls might say, hey, Barrington, we got a couple of guys that can come over and, help us think this through. Just that kind of information, making sure that happens, I think would be a great thing for everyone involved.
Yeah, and the thing that comes to my mind most certainly is the electric vehicle. So this car saves town payers $8,000 a year. This car will last 10 years. The typical lifespan of a police cruiser is 6.5. So this is cheaper, runs longer, and better. This is something that's scalable. Whatever cruisers we have in the state of Rhode Island should be electric, period. It's already, we can already do it. So, but the thing is, you still have to go and you have to make sure that the chief of police is on board and that the town council is on board. And there's, those antics in every town. How do we know if people are really interested in what's going on? So it has a lot to do with the people, but as you said earlier, if there's grassroots effort in those towns to make those suggestions from a local standpoint, that's of course far better. But I see the EC4 play a role. I see CARI possibly play a role here. League of Cities and Towns should play a role. The police union, I don't know who, but the person that I worked with from Wisconsin or in the Midwest, the guy I was talking to about the Tesla, because I had several conversations with him about the operability of an electric vehicle in the winter, in the summer. What are the issues that are coming up for you? He's got 6 Model 3 Teslas, and he's moving his entire fleet to electric vehicles because he said, I've saved enough money with 6 cruisers. I can hire another officer. So once you put it that way, that you don't have to explain that a lot. Like once we start to say, this vehicle costs the taxpayers 9 cents per mile, whereas the Intrepids or whatever, those Interceptors, they cost 30 cents a mile. That's it. We don't have to make the argument any. We can talk about the health and wellness. We can talk about how powerful these cars are, how fast they are, how sexy they are, whatever variable you want to point to. But yeah, that data was met with skepticism when I first brought it up. I said, this is, and actually, full disclosure, I own a Tesla, and while I was arguing that they should adopt this car, I drove to Atlanta on back roads to show them that we're ready. And I went through a couple of national parks. So it was a great vacation. But I drove, all on back roads, harrowing at times. But yeah, so this is a perfect example of an easy thing to share with other towns.
But I think the idea to formalize it, to have a regular meeting with town officials or representatives from the major cities is in Rhode Island, to exchange best practices and talk about it is great. We have C40, the initiative globally. The largest cities, 40 of them started since NC40. They share best practices internationally, and I think Los Angeles is even in it now. We could do this on a smaller scale, I think.
Or Kerry could sponsor it, and we could see who shows up the first time. See, because a lot of towns, Newport included, want to know what's a good idea, what's, what else, and people want to be proud of their ideas as well. But I think the whole idea of doing it on a regular basis, it helps people start, they focus. If they've got to present, they focus on ideas, and I think that might be a good way to move what is a very
It's
good
just
thing.
communicating what's possible, because it's always, I think, about the first one who did it. I always say it's always impossible until it's done, and if each other police department has the same concerns or misinformation or fear that something might go wrong and they get fired from the job because the car didn't start or whatever. But if they know of the first one who has done it, they can talk to that person. They realize, hey, this is actually a pretty nice thing. And like in Barrington, Magnus lobbied for the longest time to the police chief. He offered him even to use his Tesla for a day, and absolutely no way. And all of a sudden it changed, and they saw the Mustang. They bought the Mustang, and one day later the guys were beating each other up to drive that. So everybody who was kind of never ever I will get into this thing, no way.
So, I mean, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Just, I see a lot of two questions for you, Professor. I see a lot of SUVs in Providence with the Providence Police. Is that something that Barrington had previous to this? Yeah, and the train that wasn't a problem moving to the sedan style as opposed to the larger.
No, it wasn't. I mean, volume, interior volume was one of the metrics that I evaluated in this.
Okay.
And the interior volume of, I did look at the Tesla Model Y. The interior volume of that as compared to what they're driving was negligible. Not really a big difference. And one of the arguments that resonated with them was, you have an electric vehicle, you don't have to idle it. Police vehicle is always idling because to keep the electric equipment going. Well, if you're in an electric vehicle, you're sitting on 75 kilowatts of power. You don't need
To idle.
To idle.
And you can sneak up on.
Yeah.
In Barrington, you can sneak up on those. Yeah.
It's like, did you mention a funding source for them as well? You said that there was a grant for them, or did the city?
Yeah. So the IRA, there's some money available to municipalities through the investment
Inflation reduction.
Inflation reduction.
Okay, yeah.
I get the acronyms sometimes. So there was some funding there. Ford was running something. They're trying to, they have a sales channel to sell to municipalities.
Yeah.
So they're trying to open that up now with the EVs. And
Yeah, they got also quite a bit of funding for their charging station.
Yep.
I think they had 40% or so of the cost of the charging station.
Very good.
So what was the barrier to uptake of the solar energy by the schools? Why?
That's a great question. That's why we're talking to the Attorney General, because they've been advertising net zero schools. They advertise net zero schools to every household we're building net zero schools. But it says net zero ready.
Same question.
Which is
There's gotta be funding also for that.
Oh,
They
there's
got
plenty of
$250 billion for school renovation just this year.
There's basically, so we ran the numbers on the implementation. There's a 40%. We looked at landfill. So we were a big generator. There's 40% funding available for implementation of the equipment. 10% is for production, and 30% is part of the incentives to get people to go solar. So there's plenty of money out there. It's just a lack of will. And you know, we put out a proposal that I at first miscalculated how much money we were gonna make on it. I said it was only gonna be 600,000, but then the two chemists that are on there, they said, we gotta look at your accounting there, mister. So 2.7 million is actually what we would have
Wow.
saved or actually generated over the lifetime of the solar equipment. Mark,
So, yeah, I just noted something in my mind that kind of dovetails with some of the other comments here is, so I've been in municipal government for all of a year and a half, and I think the question about the schools and everything else, inertia drives a lot of decisions. People just get in their own head and they just want to do what they did yesterday and last week, whatever, but, I think part of the power of, and it hasn't been said in this presentation, but part of the power of overcoming that resistance is you run these things as a pilot. Say, try it with one car, see how it works. Just try it in front of City Hall, let's see how it works. You know, people get scared when you jump into the $4 million thing that should be happening. But if you can give them proof of concept, it really, you know, can overcome some of those obstacles.
yeah, pilots is really important, yes.
Have you, in your process, have you looked into electrified school buses?
Oh, yes.
Right,
And
that,
yes,
that
we
was
had them.
turned down too. right?
Yeah, they said, what did they say to us? They said, no, they said, not at this time, not at this time.
So related, so what Carrie is often good at, and I'm wondering if there's a role for something like school buses, is getting public support, getting petitions signed. I mean, we've thought a bit about school buses as being, should be an easy sell to parents. The kids on diesel spewing. Do you think that, you know, that kind of action would help in a town like Barrington if there was that kind of public pressure that could be brought to bear?
Yes. Yes, there would be. The problem is, how far do you push it? Because if I tell all the mothers in Barrington that the air has 9 times the amount of particulate matter and pollution inside the school bus, as opposed to the outside of the school bus on the roadway, I think they would worry about that. So that's when they pull all their kids off the school bus and start driving, which is not
Not what you
down.
want. Wow.
But
Bad
there's
for their lungs.
right, but there's another thing to think about with these school buses. So these school buses are gonna have, you know, somewhere around 100 kilowatts of energy storage. When they're parked next to the schools and they're plugged in, you have vehicle to grid kind of capability. So you lose power, you have the school buses lined up outside the school to support power for the school building. If it's a disaster situation, the buses can be driven themselves, and they are modules of energy, and they can provide warmth and charging and all those things as mobile resilience hubs. I mean, there's an endless amount of benefits from them, apart from the clean air, and they're kind of sexy, and they don't make that sound that a school bus makes.
Right.
Which is crazy. Yeah, I hear that when I look at this picture.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we did, and I don't know if we can actually see that energy efficiency. I just took a picture of it and threw it up there. But, I mean, I know in this particular topic summary, I did go into the literature on lung capacity. Children's lungs are developing. Young children should not be exposed to that amount of particulate matter. There's studies from LA, from several big cities that had air monitors on their buses, and it's not a good idea to have diesel buses.
Does Barrington own its school buses?
Only one of them.
Okay.
And therein lies the problem. Thank you for asking that question, because most of this is contract.
Mhm.
So we need to demand that the contractors, and we're trying to demand that the school committee demand of a, and you know, here's another interesting fact to it. In the town of Barrington, we have the Resilience and Energy Committee, and we are charged with trying to figure out how to get our infrastructure off fossil fuel. But we're only making advice on town buildings, not the school buildings, because that's under the school committee. And the school committee uses 75% of the energy, fossil fuel that's used in town buildings is used in school. So in fact, the committee that Hans and I serve on, we're only overseeing 25% of fossil fuel emissions from town buildings. And this is why we're really gung ho to try to get the town council to do something, I mean, the school committee to try to change some of the ways. So back to that, how do we rally people in town? I don't have kids in the school system and neither does Hans. And we just talked about this yesterday. If I start trying to, trying to enlist the kids to come and join, the effort, they'd probably have frown on that if some middle-aged dude is coming over there to talk to the school children. So we're not gonna do that either. But yeah, I wish there was more effort. And
Well, we could brainstorm about some of that.
yeah, and we've not slacked in op-ed. It's been raining op-eds and they've been very good at receiving those.
Yeah, it's also, we have been several times on the school committee presenting about the topic. This middle school was actually built, a new middle school with a solar ready roof. There was a plan from the beginning to put solar up. We had a proposal from a developer who would have done the solar on the roof and put solar canopies on the parking lot in the school. And in the last phase of proposal making from the developer, someone new was on the school committee and they just flipped it and said, after he had presented, well, we have to think about it because that person heard it for the first time. So there is certainly some political concern there that is also not really publicly expressed.
Right.
So it's like nailing Jello to the wall with them, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think here in Providence, I'd be curious what your advice is, because we engaged a bit with the city council. So there's a committee on environment and resilience, but it's made up of the city councilors, 5 of them who are new, 4 of those are new, and 1 is really spearheading that. So I think if we could give some of these documents to them, even as an outside group, why not give it a try, right? And see,
And again,
and listen to it.
if you would like me to meet with them, if you have contacts that you would like me to meet with, happy to do it.
Yeah, and so for them, the Office of Sustainability is tasked with implementing a lot of these things, and they're underfunded. And so the Office of Sustainability was actually saying, like, no, don't pass this buildings emissions reduction thing because we don't have a person to do the work, right? Or we pass a lot of things, the plastic bag ban, and like the director of sustainability was like going around on the weekend trying to enforce it because there was no one to enforce it. And to your point, like, no one follows up with them and makes them enforce they passed the climate justice plan, and then it just sat there for 5 years and like no one followed up with them because
But
No,
and
they
then
are.
with the schools, it sounds like there's one guy, some guy named Jeff who's like there, who's in charge of, I know, unfortunately it's not you, but he's in charge of all the facilities of all the schools, and it's like, this is kind of Rhode Island politics, like you gotta convince this guy, and then like,
You gotta find his cousin.
yeah.
Cousin will convince him.
It's probably related to someone here. So.
Yeah, but I also think, in all fairness to the town governments and the town administrations, they have been staffed for business as usual to cover their needs, their traditional needs as towns. And that was the staffing level they had. And all of a sudden, over the last 5 to 10 years, they have resiliency, they have climate, and a lot of change from there. And they have not adjusted their staff for that. And it's a tough one with the constituency, because whoever comes and wants to be voted for to the town council, if they go around and campaign with, well, we staff up in town, well, they won't get elected. It's very simple. And so we faced it in Barrington, but the other communities have just the same situation. If there's anything that needs to be done, climate action plan, they hire a consultant to write it. If there's anything else, consultant will do it. But then it's an action plan, so there will be action items, and you can't hire consultants for most of the action items. It needs to be done in town. Typical example, we advertised basically that the town staffed up one for one full-time employee for resilience as a resilience person, but the job of that person is to secure funding from IRA and whatnot, which is a great thing because we pay less as taxpayers, but it turns on the heat. They secure funding. In order to get the funding, they have to make a proposal of something they're going to implement, and they get the funding actually, but they still don't have the resource to implement. So basically it makes things from the resource level point of view, makes it actually worse.
Yeah,
And that's an obstacle that is tough to overcome.
Yeah, and in that vein, so at our financial town meeting, one citizen stood up and made a motion that we would get $25,000 as an incentive for people to switch from gas-powered lawn equipment to electric. And it went through. We got the 25,000 to do it, and we were tasked with trying to make recommendations on how to do it, and we did. We said we want to model it after the gun buyback program. You bring in your gas, we give you $100 and you can go spend it on an electric. Well, that didn't actually take. So we didn't have the gun buyback, but we had the $100. So if you went and bought either a leaf blower or a string trimmer, you could get $100 towards the purchase price of it if it was electric. Well, the town staff, and this is not a judgment of the town staff, they had a hard time doing it. Just to organize, making sure that people showed the receipt and we stapled things together, filled out the right documentation because it's taxpayer funding. So we're under all sorts of clerical regulation. So it just simply, even if we're doing the best we can and we get them funding for it, we just don't have the staff. And I mean, I think it would be interesting to ask Mark how much extra time is available at the planning office in Pawtucket.
Absolutely none.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also.
Yeah, so maybe it starts with the town budget too.
It also didn't happen that the requirement was kept up that they take back the equipment, and because you could sell your old gas blower to someone else who keeps using it and get the $100. But when you look into the fine print, basically, if you drop an old lawnmower or any kind of power equipment at the transfer station, the requirement is you have to take out the gas tank. So I thought at first, okay, $100, 100 pieces of equipment. We could, as a committee, have, I don't know, a busy afternoon and do that. But it's when you look into the details, it's a sizable job, you know. And so these little things are often really tripping points, you know, stumbling blocks.
I think we should, yeah. Thanks, Hans, and thanks, Magnus. Amazing work.
Thank you.
I hope we can do it in every town.
And thanks everybody for coming. We're also planning a new member happy hour soon. Fran, you're gonna plan that?
You're definitely
Yeah,
gonna
you
do
sure?
a happy hour.
Yeah,
I haven't picked a date yet, though, so just stay tuned. Get the date and we'll be-
If you want a yard sign, hang out for 3 minutes. I gotta grab it in the car. Thanks, Zoom folks.
Did
Next
everybody
time.
sign the sign-in sheet?
Yeah.